let's get you better at shooters today. I down one. Ooh. I'm gonna die from the shot like that. So in today's video, I'm gonna help you improve at FPS games. So to give you a little premise, I've been playing FPS games for upwards of 15 plus years now, from anywhere from Wolfenstein to Warrock to Soldier Front to Counter-Strike to now Tarkov. I've played probably every shooter under the sun, or at least most of them, minus maybe Destiny 2. I missed out on that. Activision, all that good stuff. We're not even going to talk about it. Now, this guide is more for the beginners. I'm also going to be releasing a more advanced guide. That's going to be, you know, later on. I'll put a card up over here or over here. You get the gist. I'm going to give you 5 of my top tips that will help beginners play FPS a hell of a lot better than you did before. Before we get into anything, my name is Tom, also known as CalzoneOP. I also stream on Twitch. Links are down below, so definitely go check that out. I answer any questions down there, also in the YouTube comments, so drop me a comment if you have any. If you also want to play with some more people, especially Tarkov, because we've been playing a lot of Tarkov recently, join our Discord. Links down below. You'll have a lot of fun, you might meet some cool people, and it'll overall make your gaming experience a little bit better. So I'm going to start off with the top tip right off the bat, and that's map knowledge. And the only way that you're going to get that is through practice, experience, and watching other people and learning what they do. There's a reason why other pros, they VOD review, or they watch themselves over, or they watch other people or other teams over and watch what they do in comparison to themselves, so they can compare and contrast what they can improve on. And that's what you need to do. Not to that extent, you know, and depending on how high or how far you want to be, up the ranks of FPS games, because, I mean, I just enjoy playing them. But if you want to get better, you want to at least have a basic understanding of the map and, like, the corners that they can be and the peaks and the angles and stuff like that. And that's only going to happen through experience. So I suggest you at least play for a couple of weeks, if not a couple months, to really get your experience down and understand that, you know, this is not going to come overnight. But I definitely recommend you guys watching some streamers or watching some YouTube videos and getting some tips, and it could exponentially help your improvement. Because that's what I do for Tarkov. I would consider myself still a like average player, maybe slightly above average, but I would not be there right now if I wasn't watching other streamers and other YouTubers on what to do and how to do it and when to do it. And by no means am I saying that you should essentially copy somebody or just play exactly how somebody else plays, because I mean, that's not fun, and that's not who you are, and that's not how you play. Everybody's going to play a little bit differently. So you take little bits from, let's say, Summit and Lupo and Clean and Glorious and all these people, all these amazing people, and bring it into your own play style, and you just created your own play style. And then if you get really good, other people are going to take away from what you do, and so on and so forth. And that's what happens, and everyone just helps each other out. So it's kind of cool. Next to map knowledge, I think another one super important, and this kind of ties into map knowledge, is sprinting when you shouldn't. So the majority of FPS games have a mechanic known as sprinting or running or whatever you want to call it, and you really don't want to be running when you shouldn't be, because usually in most games when you're running, it takes a lot longer to ADS or aim down sight, as opposed to if you're walking or crawling or whatever it may be. So by all means, you can sprint around the map all you want, but more than likely than not, you're going to get killed a lot more than if you were playing a little bit more tactfully. Tactically. I find personally that when I sprint less, first off, it's going to make it so that other players cannot hear you nearly as well, because in most games, the running mechanic is actually louder than the walking or crouching mechanic. Now, I'm not saying to just walk around the whole entire map or crouch the whole map or just camp in a corner. That is not what I'm saying whatsoever. I'm actually a complete advocate to do the complete opposite. But once you learn the map, you'll understand when to run, when not to run, and what angles other people can actually get you at. Consciously, try to run a little bit less and be more conscious of why you're running and when you're running. Don't just be sprinting around the map aimlessly like a chicken without its head on, you know what I mean? All right, now that we got that out of the way, let's talk about mice and mouse pads. So first things first, there's 2 main components when you play FPS shooters, and that's going to be your mouse and your mouse pad. These are 2 completely key components to succeed in FPS games, period. Personally, I've always been a huge advocate of using a wired mouse, and that's kind of like what I've been kind of brought up on. That's what I've been using. But recently, and within I'd say the last couple of years now, this bad boy right here is actually insane. So lately, the wireless mouse game has actually been so improved that you cannot tell the difference between a wireless mouse and a wired mouse as far as input delay goes. They're literally neck and neck. So I highly recommend you get a wireless mouse, but you don't necessarily need it. But it does help because wired mice sometimes can get stuck, and yeah, you can get a bungee, of course, but some setups can't get a bungee. Like the way that my setup is right now, a bungee wouldn't work because I don't really have the space because of all the monitors and all my equipment and all that stuff. So wireless is kind of a necessity for me right now, and I'm kind of spoiled to it. Now, you don't necessarily need a wireless mouse, but in my opinion, I think it's a huge advantage. But more importantly, you want a mouse that you're able to change the DPI, or the dots per inch. Now, that's going to help you fine-tune your sensitivity for every game that you play. Now, I have videos to help you adjust your DPI. They're a little old, but they do the job perfectly fine. I'll link it over here. As long as you have a Logitech mouse. If you have another one, it's very, very similar. It would just be using a different software. And we'll talk about that more later on in this video about sensitivity. As far as a mouse pad goes, I highly recommend you go with cloth. Some people go with the hard pads, which are fine. They're more durable. But in my opinion, I find that I have a lot more control in a cloth pad. The one caveat to a cloth pad is they do get dirty. So you want to make sure every couple of months you want to clean it or replace it with a new one, whichever is easier for you. Just to give you a comparison of how big my mouse pad is to my mouse. Get a large mouse pad. You can thank me later. I have links down below to Amazon. Now, we'll talk about it later in the sensitivity section, but you're definitely going to want to at least try. Just feel me for a second. Try to use a lower sensitivity that you're using now, because more than likely you're missing your shots, not because, you know, you can't handle it or you're not good or whatever it may be. It might just be your sensitivity. Your sensitivity might just be a little too high for you, or at least you're not used to it yet. So in my opinion, I think you should start off with a lower DPI, not super low like Shroud, but somewhere between like the 550 to 800 DPI range, and you can adjust it accordingly. Some people, you know, there are some, but very rarely they're going to be pros with higher DPI than that. There are some that play at 1600, but to be honest, that's very slim to none, and those are at this point an outlier. Most professionals play at around 400 to 800 DPI, and you can kind of fine tune it and pick which one works for you. I personally have been playing at 400 the majority of my FPS career, if you want to call it that. But as far as that goes, right now I'm at about 550, and that's kind of been my sweet spot because I don't switch my DPIs at all to maintain consistency. And I've been editing a lot more with like the YouTube videos and stuff, and it just makes my life a little bit easier to be able to move my mouse and not have to flick my hand across my whole mouse pad just to change an edit or split a clip. So that's why I do it. Feel free to play with that range and go from there. So tying into the big mouse pad, sensitivity is going to be your best friend. There's a few things that you want to make sure are ticked off in every single game that you play, and that's mouse filtering, mouse acceleration, and mouse smoothing. You want to make sure all three of those options are ticked off. You do never want those on. You want it to be raw input, and that's it. And to tie in with the sensitivity, as far as this goes, if you're over flicking or under flicking, you should adjust that in your sensitivity until you get it fine-tuned enough to the point where you're getting more consistent. So if you're over flicking, you should lower your sensitivity, and if you're under flicking, you should raise your sensitivity a little bit and see how that goes. Now, as far as sensitivity goes, when I put my hand on one side of the mouse pad to all the way on the other side of the mouse pad, I want to do about a 270 to 360 degree turn. You don't want it much more or much less because you might actually be hurting yourself one way or the other. Each game is different, of course, so if I'm going to be playing Valorant or Counter-Strike, you know, you usually don't need to turn all that much, but if I'm playing a game like Call of Duty, you definitely do, and it's a much more fast-paced shooter in my opinion. So it comes down to which one you play, and you can adjust it for that. I'm going to briefly go over keyboards in this video, but as far as this goes, I recommend using a mechanical keyboard. It's just more consistent, at least for me. I love the feel of the keys, and it makes me enjoy my whole gaming experience a hell of a lot more than if I were to use a membrane keyboard, which is like the standard keyboard you would get with the computer. I personally use brown switches, but you guys, a lot of people use reds, a lot of people use silvers, speed reds, stuff like that. It's up to you. It's all preference at the end of the day. Just don't use blues because those things are loud as hell and your friends will hate you on Discord. Next thing's up, keybinds. So to tie it back into the keyboard, make sure that your keybinds are proper for each game that you play. And I like to make my keybinds kind of consistent game to game. I know you can't do that with every game because some games are just they're just different. It just is what it is. So for example, a lot of games, crouch is control. And in my opinion, that's okay. But for me, I personally like C. It doesn't make me extend my pinky. So it just makes life a little bit easier. So I always change my crouch to C in whatever game I play. So as far as keybinds go, they do come down to personal preference. And you basically just want your keybinds to be more simplified and closer to your WASD. Or even, you can even put some on your mouse. Nowadays, the majority of mice have buttons on the side like this. So, for example, you can put this for talking on Discord, you can put this for discarding, you can do this for switching weapons, whatever it may be. Another tip for the majority of games, especially tac shooters like Counter-Strike and Valorant, my OGs will know exactly what I'm talking about. Jump mechanic. So for games like Counter-Strike and Valorant, this is my jump. Super, super key. And if you're an OG of Counter-Strike or Valorant, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. So give that a shot. It might help. For other games like Tarkov, I just keep it on spacebar because it makes sense to me. So bonus tip. This is actually super important, and I almost forgot to mention it because I wanted to make sure that you guys got this. This is gonna sound kind of obvious, I guess you could say, but aim at the head, like always, like every single time. Unless you're playing Tarkov, you know, there's a couple outliers in there. Like, now this might sound kind of obvious, but you'd be surprised by how many people actually don't do this. Make sure that you're aiming at their heads the majority of the time, and you can almost pre-aim before corners and stuff like that. You want to keep your crosshair kind of where their head would be in your head, if that makes sense. So imagine where they'd be around the corner. Keep your crosshair where that would be at their head. Does that make sense? I hope. But I know where the people are, and they're not at the ground. So you know, you want to be a little bit careful. So just aim higher, pre-aim where their head would be, and that'll help you a lot, especially in games like Counter-Strike and Valorant. And those are my 5 tips, and I guess a couple bonuses in there. So I hope you guys enjoyed. And if you did, smash that like button. Don't forget to subscribe with notifications on. And until next time, your boy Calzone is out. Peace. That was a good ass video. Let's go, boys. Let's go.